Welcome back to another episode of George in the Jungle, presented by Remington Tavern. As always, Remington Tavern is located at 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. You can check them out on Instagram at RemyTavCincy. That's REMITAV with a Y, or follow them on Facebook. And with that, George, we are off. Another week of Cincinnati sports for you. But happy belated Father's Day. I know I shot you a text, but I hope you had a good
Father's Day to you. Probably.
I hope you had a good weekend.
Yeah, Father's Day. Yeah. Father's Day, I had a bottle of Blackberry Crown Royal, right? I was going to take it to Remington Tavern, but somehow on Father's Day, it kind of disappeared while watching the U.S. Open. It just kind of, it got opened, and then a little more was drank, and a little more, and a little more. And, one of the owners of that place may have helped me. I'm not sure.
Sounds about right. I actually had my 40th. My 40th was on Saturday, and then Father's Day on Sunday. So
happy birthday! Welcome to the Over the Hill gang.
That's what they say. I decided this year I'm celebrating 41 because with all the hubbub with the baby and everything, I didn't really get to do anything. So next year we'll properly celebrate 40.
Yeah, the only big. Well, obviously, everyone's 21st is big. 16's big because you're driving. 21's big. 30 was big for me because I really felt like life was over after I turned 30. Like I was so depressed. When I was 29 and a half, I was counting down the days till, and I, had a big bash and then woke up and I'm like, I don't really feel all that bad. I'm not dead yet. So here I am a few years later, still kicking. So 40 is not bad either. In fact, I've never even thought about it since that 29th, since turning 30. I haven't really thought about age that much. And if I sit around and brood about it now, it ain't going to be good, because if I thought 30 was bad, try 60 something.
Well, glad you're still here with us, George.
Yes. Hanging in there at least this week.
In any case, another group of guys hanging in there. Your Cincinnati Reds did take a game tonight. They've officially beaten the Pittsburgh Pirates after dropping one yesterday in the series opener. So they'll have the good old rubber match tomorrow. But they've been on a little bit of a roll, 6-4 in their last 10. Not setting the world on fire as the New York Mets have been since the first pitch, or the opening pitch thrown out by Grimace. Apparently that's become a thing. That they've won 6 games. I think last night they had like 14 runs on 22 hits or something outrageous. But yeah, the Cincinnati Reds, they're treading water, I will say. Not setting the world on fire, but doing enough to stay in at least the wild card race. But what's been impressing you the last week, George?
Well, they're keeping things interesting, and I tell you what, they hang in there and all that good stuff. But I guess what's impressed me, Candelario coming alive the way he has and has been mashing the ball and continues to do so. He had to leave the game tonight with a leg injury. I don't know how serious that is. I hope it's not much, because he's been hot. He's been doing a good job for them. And I'm still kind of bummed about that series in Milwaukee when you take the first game Friday night.
In the manner of which you did.
Yes, with 5 errors and you still win the game.
Yeah.
And then the next 2, you lose them the way they did. And they were right there. Both of them could have gone the other way, and they didn't. And I can't shake this feeling. And I forget what they said after the game. Was it like 8 series in a row that Milwaukee has won?
It was 8. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, this weekend, it was Saturday before they played. And I'm just like, even though the Reds won Friday night, I still, and I didn't know that stat, but I still just felt like they're owned by Milwaukee. And they are Milwaukee's bitch, for lack of a better term. And I'm right. And I know David Bell didn't want to hear about it after Sunday's game, but when you're in a division with a team that has won that division and fared as well as Milwaukee has recently, you got to find a way to get that turned around. And I know it's baseball and all these weird things happen in a long season, but it feels like the way it used to be with the Cardinals. And I don't want to see that continue. So next time they get Milwaukee, they need to make something happen. And then what's impressive, I mean, tonight, Nick Lodolo, 7 innings, 1 run, 8 strikeouts. That dude's our stopper. There's no doubt about it. And I think they said that I forget what the stat was, but he's been a stopper. I think only one time he hasn't put an end to a losing streak, or at least the team, has ended the losing streak in games Lodolo pitches. So that was big for him tonight. Would have loved to seen a pitching matchup with him and Paul Skeens, but that's okay. Just get the win tonight. Lodolo's been tough. Hunter Green, God bless his heart, Friday. I don't know how he hung in there the way he did with the defense behind him. And, if that dude can just cut down on the walks, and that's driven me nuts about the pitchers. Just too many, him and Abbott and Frankie, they've had too many walks here lately. And then you go in the bullpen and Sims and Diaz as well. But Diaz has gotten the job done when they've called on him. It's always exciting. It's always exciting. But when he comes in those save situations. So, honestly, as shaky as that guy is, I got to say, hey, he's gotten the saves, and you've got to give him credit for that, I think. At least 4 for 4 in his last 4 save opportunities. It may be a little deeper than that. I'm not sure.
Well, they certainly haven't been pretty, especially Friday.
Oh, God. That was crazy.
It was bananas. The ending on the game, the ending to the game Friday to win the way that they did. Again, you brought it up that they had 5 errors, and you thought that you stole a game that you shouldn't have won, really.
Right.
To end it on a bloop bunt back to the pitcher. Absolutely crazy. And that is right after the play where you thought the game was over, where they slid right into Tyler Stevenson in the tag. And maybe he got away with a little shove there, a little stiff arm action, if you will. I don't know what you call that, interference or blocking the plate. I'm not really sure, because he wasn't really blocking the plate. He just kind of gave a nice little stiff arm there. I don't know what the legality of that is, but regardless, it worked out in the Reds' favor. They win the game. So they steal one there. And then, to your point, they have lost 8 series in a row to Milwaukee. And I think it's largely because if you look at on paper, even the last several years, the Brewers really have been top to bottom better than the Reds.
Yeah, they have. They have. And the Reds, there's a couple years there where it looked like, I remember probably 2 to 3 years ago going into the All-Star break, and the Reds had won a couple games in the series with them. And then they're coming out of the break and they go to Milwaukee for like 3 or 4 games and got swept. And that season got out of control right there. And I thought right there is where they could have established something that season, and were unable to. And we're not at that point in this season yet. There's plenty of time to get back at the Brewers. But when you got these division games, man, and this stretch is big for the Reds. I mean, they've got the Pirates again tomorrow. They'll play them again next week, back here, I guess. And then they go to St. Louis. So a lot of division games coming up. And that's good for the Reds, because I think the toughest part of their schedule is behind them. But I'd just like to see them get a little more traction here, and plenty of time to do it. But you can't keep saying that. Here it is, June 18th. And I'm still waiting for them to really get that traction.
Going back to the Brewers, Willie Adames was a giant thorn in the Red side in this series. They did mention in the broadcast, I didn't know this because I don't follow the Brewers that closely, but it seems like kind of going back to them having a better roster top to bottom than the Reds, that's been the case since they brought Willie Adames in and shored up that shortstop position. But this is the last year of his contract, and they, at least the announcers at that point in time, I want to say it was LeCure and maybe it was Sadak and LeCure, but they were talking about they didn't believe that the Brewers were going to be bringing back Willie Adames, just that the price tag would be too big for a team that doesn't spend a ton of money on an aging player at a position like shortstop. So I don't hate any of that. Right. They both sounded like they'd be surprised if the Brewers were to bring back Willie Adames. And if you're looking ahead to the future, maybe that's not such a bad thing.
No, hopefully he ends up in the American League. That's what I would say. What he's done to the Reds. But when you bring that situation up, and I'm thinking all this stuff we're talking about with Friday night's game and the errors and Willie Adames and shortstop, what do you think about Ellie? Is he going to stay at shortstop, or is the long-term move to toss him in the outfield? Because he's got a gun.
He does have that
spectacular play, but daggone it, those missed double plays the other night should have cost them the game.
Well, I think that you probably be kidding yourself if you didn't think that there wasn't a shuffle on the horizon once Matt McLain's back, because I think that he showed last season that he plays a better shortstop than Ellie De La Cruz.
Right.
Although I want to say he played probably more or as much second base last season. I don't know what the stats are on that off the top of my head, but I want to say he played about as much second base as he did shortstop when Ellie.
I think he probably did. I don't have the split, but it sure seems that way.
So I think it'll be interesting to see what David Bell or whoever happens to be skipper at that point in time does whenever Matt McLain does come back, whether that's this season or next. So who knows?
I'm surprised that they do it this season, but I don't know. I'm sitting there watching that, and it's like, I mean, we all have to feel that guy would be a terrific outfielder too. And I know people talk about wear and tear on legs and stuff, but I don't know. I think you're serving, and there's been a lot of outfielders who get wear and tear on their legs that played a long time. It's not like they're running around out there on AstroTurf now, like Ken Griffey Jr. was doing in Seattle.
Yeah, he is only 22 years old, though. Let's keep that in mind. It's not as if he's been in the league for a long time. He just hit 162, last week?
And that is hard to keep, it's hard perspective. To believe, first of all.
Yeah, you have to keep that in perspective. You're talking about a guy who's still acclimating himself to the bigs, still acclimating himself to the United States. There's kind of a lot of moving parts there. And truthfully, I mean, when Hunter Green was talking about it, I know we talked last week about the presser, the after game presser that I caught with Hunter Green. But when he was talking about Ellie Cruz, he was asked directly about Ellie De La Cruz, and he mentioned just that he's hardworking. He's one of the first in, one of the last out, almost every day, and that you don't see that with superstars on teams all the time. So as you're talking about a guy who's trying to keep things in perspective with a guy this young, you also have to keep in mind that I don't think he's taking any of this lightly. You've seen vast improvement, I think, in his approach at the plate. And granted, he doesn't get a ton of the calls that you might get if you were, about 6 inches shorter.
Right.
Because I don't know that the umpires are necessarily, and it's probably a natural thing. I don't think it's anything malicious or anything of that nature. But it's hard to change your strike zone with every batter that comes up when a guy has that different of a strike zone compared to pretty much everybody else that you see in the lineup.
Right. And Hunter can certainly relate because it seems like the past year he's kind of gone through that and starting to come out of that fog of everything being new and adjusting and all that and really starting to settle in. Again, I don't want to rip the dude because I think he's doing really well. We're watching him turn into a really good pitcher, and he would be the first to tell you he's got to get those walks down. He just has to.
Yeah, it seems like you almost see that with every pitcher at this point, starter for that matter, going through one inning where they have like almost 30 pitches or hitting that 30 pitch mark. And if you can erase that one inning, I think that's where you start to see those quality starts almost every time. That's where you start to see those 6, 7 innings like you did tonight with Nick Lodolo. So they just got to figure out getting that one inning under control.
It was interesting last night hearing Carson Spires talking about that, where he had that first inning. I think it was last night, right?
Yes, he pitched last night. Yes,
The
against
first inning was really rocky, and he was not hitting the strike zone, walked the first batter, and he's like, everything I was doing was backwards because I couldn't get strikes early in the count, and then I'm not able to throw the stuff I'm comfortable with throwing because I got to find a way to get a strike on the guy. And, they're hitting him because they kind of know what's coming. And he was finally able to kind of work through that. That was big for him to do that. And then he did give up a run in the second, but then he gave him some good innings after that and at least got through, I think, 5. And then to hear him talk about it and how he worked through that. And, the pitching coach, DJ, came out and talked him through it. And it's just interesting to hear those guys that are, going through that and the process there. And it's funny that the game was on. I'm like, I'll listen to this part, but I'm mad they lost. I don't want to hear any more about this game. And he starts talking about that, what happened in the first inning. It's like, damn, it's really good stuff to hear what those guys are working through and what their thought process is and how they fight to get out of it. And, they're there for a reason. I mean, they've got to be mentally tough or they're not going to make it to the big leagues. I mean, you get everything thrown at you for the most part when you're down in the minors and then you get up here and yes, it is different and all that, but you've got to still be mentally tough and get through it. And a lot of these guys have that just built in. And it was just interesting to hear him and his approach and how the first inning got away from him a little bit. And it could have been a lot worse if he didn't, straighten it out. And he did. Credit to him for that.
Well, the Reds currently sit at 35 and 38, I believe, after tonight. I don't know if that's updated, actually. They may be at 36 and 38.
Yeah, I don't know either. I got 35 and 38 here, but
in any case, if that is correct,
35 and 38 looks right.
So the Milwaukee at 42 and 30. They're 7.5 games back there in the division, in 4th place. I guess tied for 3rd place at 7.5 back. But in the wild card, somehow, some way, because the National League is absolutely insane, the Reds currently stand 1 game back in the wild card standings, as they still have two teams ahead of them in San Diego and Washington. Plenty of baseball left to play. But
yeah, if you look at those wild card standings right now in the National League, it's a free for all. And the Cardinals lost tonight, which is good news. Lost an extra inning, so probably too early for me to be scoreboard watching. But it's just in my nature to make sure Milwaukee and St. Louis lose as much as possible. But yeah, it's a scrum. It's not that way in the American League. There's some separation there, and then you got the wild card teams, and there may be a couple teams in the hunt, and then there's a drop off. But the National League has all these teams that are, scraping to get back to 500, and a lot of them, St. Louis being one, or they may be are they above 500 now? They got to be close.
No, they're at 500, and there are only 4. There's only 4 teams currently above 500.
That's insane.
That's absolutely crazy.
It's insane. But
I don't recall ever seeing anything like that.
Which gets to what we talked about last week about the Reds hopefully being buyers and trying to add,
right?
Because it's out there to be had. I mean, it's there, and they've got the horses to do it now. You hope Friedel's injury isn't serious and he's not out long again. He doesn't think it is, but
he said he doesn't have any sustaining injury. I think he was out practicing today. If what I read was,
I hope that's accurate. The case. And hopefully Candelario's okay. He had to leave the game. It looked like he tweaked something going in the second, but
and he's been on fire.
He has totally been on fire. I mean, he and Ellie both have had a good. Well, Candelario's had a good 2 month or almost 2 month stretch now. A month and a half. He's really been good at the plate for them. And, Ellie over the past several weeks has been picking it up, and especially over the last 10 days or so. Do you think is he going to make the All-Star team?
Ellie?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. As of yesterday, when the All-Star ballots were updated, the Reds tweeted out Ellie stood at third for shortstops, John India at eighth for second baseman, Jake Fraley at ninth for the DH spot, Tyler Stevenson at 10th for catcher, and Christian Encarnacion Strand at 10th for first base.
I think given what Ellie does on the bases alone is probably enough. First of all, it's electric. Every fan of baseball is going to want to see that guy in the All-Star game. And I know you don't award it based on fan excitement, but when you're baseball and you're looking for eyeballs and you're thirsting for these guys like, the tear Aaron Judge has been on. It's unbelievable. It's historic. He's on a tear right now that, only Barry Bonds in his heyday, that would be the most recent guy to have a comparable stretch to what Aaron Judge is on now. And, then you're going back to guys like Gehrig and Ruth. I think it would be good for baseball. I think it's a no-brainer in my book that if he isn't voted in, which he probably won't be, but he certainly should be added to that roster because, if it gets to the ninth inning and the National League needs a run and gets somebody on, and even if you use him as a pinch runner, turn it loose, baby. I would love to see that. I think everybody would.
Well, I just looked up the actual standings for the votes, like all the votes for everybody. Shortstop Mookie Betts has, as of June 17th, so yesterday, 1,023,690. Trey Turner at second place has 509,043, and Ellie at 324,559 puts him roughly about 700,000 votes behind Mookie Betts with his 1 million.
So Mookie's well on his way to get that starting nod.
Probably, barring some crazy computer farming for Ellie De La Cruz.
I just really feel like he'll be added to that roster, I think, and especially if he's going to hit like he has here lately.
I think it'd be crazy not to put him on. That's what
I think
the fans want to see, right?
Yeah, but Caitlin Clark was left off the Olympic team. Things happen that you just shake your head and you're like, are these people thinking properly here? And
that's a whole different conversation for a different day.
It totally is. And I don't want to get into it because it's just because I get it, because you do have a lot of veterans and you do have a lot of veterans that have played for a while. I do get it. But, then again, Christian Leitner was on the damn dream team. So, you've got spots there that are going to be at the end of the bench that, you can maybe fool around with. And I certainly think Ellie will probably be in the All-Star game.
Yeah, obviously there's still some time before the All-Star game, and you can vote, I think, up to 20 times a day or something like that using the same email address every day on MLB.com, or at Reds.com for that matter. But we'll see. We'll see what happens, and I think that there's probably plenty of Ellie All-Star games in his future. So
I certainly hope so. The dude is fun to watch. He is something else.
Well, if you want to talk about guys that are fun to watch, it sounds like we have one more season at least of T. Higgins here in the Queen City, as T. Higgins has officially inked his tender on his franchise tag. No real surprises there.
No, the only surprise for me is it happened this soon, and I'm glad it did.
It was
that
certainly
says a lot about him, his agent. They're not going to play this stupid game of chicken.
Like they did with Jesse Bates.
Right. They're not, but, T's going to want to get in there, get his work done, and have as good of a season as he can, because if he's not going to be here, he's going to make a boatload of money somewhere else. So it behooves him to handle it this way. And not a lot of guys would, at least based on history. A lot of guys would pout, sit out. I'm not going to camp. I'm not doing this, and he's not. He's putting this season ahead of his, individual wants or, losing his leverage and lessening his leverage, I guess. But he's not playing that game. He wants to win football games. That's what that tells me. Am I crazy? Am I being too soft here? But I think it tells me he wants to have a hell of a season. Now, some of that could be selfish, but I also think he sees an opportunity here for the Bengals to make a damn good run.
Well, I would think that the price tag for T. Higgins goes up, with the obviously a better stat line than what he had last season, is something around 64 catches and 600 some odd yards last year.
Yeah, what he missed, like 5 games or something with injuries.
That's a lot. That's a lot of time. And if you're able to get in with the staff and start working on yourself and getting right, the longer you sit out, the less time you have to work on those types of things. I'm also curious, as we saw last week, we saw Joe Burrow talking about Andrei Yosevich, or Yosevas. I don't know how you say
Yosevas.
Yoshi. We saw an awful lot of talk though from Joe Burrow. We saw all reports that I saw on camp were that he looked outstanding and would be challenging for that spot with T. And as you see a guy who's got a little bit of time under his belt in the league now, he's had some flashy plays. He's scored. You also have Jermaine Burton kind of chomping at the bit, wanting to get his touches and getting the chemistry with Joe Burrow. You wonder how much of that has to do with T. Higgins wanting to get in that room and make sure that he's not losing the chemistry, so he doesn't end up in a situation where Joe might be more reliant and, maybe a little more hesitant to throw T's way because he's built the chemistry and had the connection through camps and through OTAs and all of that with some of the other guys, some of the younger guys.
It would certainly light a fire under me. I mean,
if you're looking to get paid, that's a big deal. You already have the injury history. You don't want to have the stats not backing up who you think you are as a player.
And I think Joe genuinely feels that way. I don't think he was posturing, saying this.
I agree.
Right. I don't think he was doing it to get a light a fire under T, but no.
I also don't think Joe's going to be somebody
that plays into it. I'm sure that plays into it.
I don't think Joe's going to be somebody to talk about T. Higgins if T. Higgins isn't there. So he's not going to put T in a weird situation where he's I wish you were here, bud, or anything like that with the media. He's not going to play those types of games. So he's only going to talk about the guys that are there.
Right.
But that said, just
and that's the way you handle that.
But kind of looking at the flip side of the coin, I'm just curious if there was anything there. Right.
I mean, it may not have been intentional, but it was a good little message. And I'm sure that plays into it as well. I'm sure. But T's best course of action, and I always thought this, it's fine that he missed this other stuff, but be ready at camp, be ready to go for the season, and play as well as you can this year, and that other stuff will take care of itself. There is no doubt about it. And it's good that he knows that, and he's handling it that way.
Just interesting to see. Glad to see it happen as early as it did, as you brought up. I was caught a little off guard by that as well. But there was another signing that happened in the last week that also caught us all a little bit off guard, as Ted Karras extends his contract with the Cincinnati Bengals, so he will be here for at least 2 more seasons. Any surprises there for you?
Look, Karras has been a godsend since he walked into that building. And he's helped solidify things. He's, he is a put on the hard hat, go to work guy, just great teammate. I can't say enough nice things about Ted Karras on and off the field. I think he's a glue guy. I just, he shows up every day, does what he's supposed to do. No issues with him whatsoever. And that was a wise move by the Bengals to just get that done now. And obviously Ted wanted it done, and he's happy here. And hopefully, he keeps getting another year added onto that until, he's had enough or the game shows him he's had enough. But I just, those foundations, those rock guys like that, you just can't have enough of. And I will say this: the Bengals have a pretty good team of those guys, and bringing Von Bell back, he's one of those kind of guys that you don't have to worry about. They got a good team full of those guys, and again, that goes back to what we've talked about is how they make those personnel and drafting decisions, and it works. It totally works.
You bring up the fact that he is good, not just on the field, but off the field. He was their Walter Payton Man of the Year last year. He has raised over $1 million with his Cincy Hat Foundation, and what he's done for that little community out in Indiana, with that is the recipient of all the proceeds from the Cincy Hat Foundation that he's set up here in Cincinnati. I think I'd be shocked if he went anywhere before his career's over at this point. He's mentioned just his dad, his grandfather both have championship NFL rings. He's mentioned in interviews bringing the Karras Foundation and the Karras family and the Brown families together for the first time ever has meant a lot to him. And just those storied NFL families to finally be intertwined. He wants to win for Mike Brown, for the Brown family. And it's very strange, even still, as it's been this way probably now for, 15 years or so, where players talk glowingly about the Browns, but it still always catches me a little off guard when players talk that glowingly about the Brown family, because growing up, it wasn't anything like this.
Right. Well, yeah, and you were more probably the 90s and
bag on head. Yeah.
Yeah, it was ugly then, because when I grew up, they spoke glowingly of Paul Brown and the Brown family and what the Browns did. That when Paul passed away and things went off the rails there for a decade, man, it was bad. It was so bad. But by God, they got it righted now. And I think the Paul's grandchildren and great grandchildren are very, very moved by the esteem he's held in, and they want to live up to that and keep that going, because they know, they would want him to be proud of them and how they're continuing this football team that essentially he founded. Cincinnati got this football team because Paul Brown wanted a football team here because of what happened in Cleveland, and the NFL respected him so much that Cincinnati got the franchise. I guess it was the AFL back then, because you had the NFL and the AFL, but the
Right.
powers that be, and the people, the money people who wanted to put money into a franchise, trusted Paul Brown to do everything they did, and here they are. And I was reading something not earlier today about the AFC North and the impact Paul Brown had on the Cleveland Browns, who then went to Baltimore, and on the Cincinnati Bengals. So half the AFC North are teams that he brought the Browns into the NFL. They were in the old, whatever it was, AAFC or whatever back in the 40s. So two of the four teams, and then you could argue the old Cleveland Browns, the Ravens, maybe he had an influence on three of them, because he had Cleveland and he had the Ravens, who were the Browns. So yeah, that it's good that the Brown family is held in higher esteem these days. And Ted Karras, having that football family, is going to be well aware of that. And I still I can't talk about Ted without thinking about his great uncle Alex, who punched out the horse in the movie Blazing Saddles. It's crazy. I think that's his. I said his great uncle. I think his grandfather's brother, Alex Karras, who played in the NFL for years and became kind of an actor and was a character. One of the most famous scenes, from a movie in the 70s ever was him hitting that horse, Bongo.
And I can't think of someone punching out a horse without thinking about the Bearcat. So
I guess
I guess it's full circle.
It is. Art Long. Well, no, that clip, we played that clip a bunch when Art Long did that, allegedly hit the horse.
I don't doubt that.
You think
The
you're
other
really
Bengals.
going to do damage when you punch a horse?
I don't know
Because you
what goes
know
through your
big
head when
these
you
things
decide. I don't know what goes through your head when you. I don't
I
know that I've actually.
must not have known that was a movie.
Uh, the other news in for the Bengals, Hard Knocks is going to feature the entire division for the first time, as they will be featuring all four teams from the AFC North, covering the in season, covering the last 6 weeks of the season for these four teams. You had, for the first time ever, all four of these teams finished over 500 last season, and now Hard Knocks is going to feature them in season. All four teams. They've never featured, I don't think, more than one team at a time
Correct.
for anything that they've done. So
Right.
now just trying to figure out how to spice things up on a show that's lost a bit of following over the last couple of years because it's kind of become rinse, wash, repeat. This changes things up for them and gives a fresh perspective for the franchise.
I'll tell you, I'm excited about this because you're going to get looks at in-season stuff. You know, it's one thing with the training camps and the practices, and I'm anxious to see how much they really get, but I think they're going to get a lot because they talk about, you know, they're going to have these mounted cameras and stuff. It's not like they're going to be always intrusive. They're going to rely on that a lot. It's going to be very interesting because in season, you know, there's no fooling around. You're battling for your playoff life in December in this division, and there's going to be, you know, there's going to be interdivision matchups where the Bengals are playing the Ravens or the Browns. I mean, this is going to be fantastic. And the fact that it's the AFC North and it's the Bengals division, the HBO is going to have every television in Ohio watching this series because, you know, you got the Browns and the Bengals, but there's also a lot of Steelers fans, as you well know, in Ohio as well, since that's over in that corner of Pennsylvania. It's going to absolutely, I can't wait to see it. I don't want to wish 3 or 4 months away, but that's going to be really interesting to see how that is. And the only thing I wish was different is that they would have done this when Marvin was head coach, and I would have loved to have seen his face when they told him he was going to have Hard Knocks poking around in December of a season doing, you know, inside team stuff. He would have had a fit. I would have loved that. Would have been the opening scene of Hard Knocks, is showing Marvin's face when they tell him, hey, we're doing Hard Knocks in the heat of your playoff race.
Well, let me give you a different reason to be excited, George. The other 2 years that the Bengals have been featured on Hard Knocks were 2009 and 2013. The Cincinnati Bengals, of course, made the playoffs both of those years.
Yes, they did.
So you have a team that has made the playoffs, and every year they've been featured on Hard Knocks. So I guess the only thing that I wish they would change is the fact that I don't want to share the spotlight with anybody else. If you're going to put them in the spotlight, I want them to just be the Bengals and right off into the playoffs again.
But I would think there's going to be some really good stuff where
I'd agree.
A team, you know, if you got stuff going on in Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, seeing how they're preparing for each other and what I just think it could be phenomenal. And I'm surprised that, you know, the NFL is just owning everything as it is. I'm surprised, like, they've got these teams allowing this. I'm interested to see it. They did say that the teams get to screen the episodes before they go, just so, because nobody wants to be giving away secrets. The teams don't, and God bless the producers at NFL Films and HBO. They don't want to do it either, and nor should you. I read it, you know, some interesting quotes for them about that and making sure they don't. You know, the teams won't control the storylines, but if there's some kind of info that intelligence that they don't want the other teams having, I get that. That's how it should be. That shouldn't be blasted out of there because, quite honestly, the teams and the players and the coaches are doing everyone a favor allowing them in. I know it goes hand in hand with the television contracts and the money they make and all that, but still, You're trying to win football games. You're trying to get in the playoffs, and you're trying to get to a Super Bowl. And, NFL Films and HBO is no dummy. There's a good chance, probably a high percentage chance, that one of those teams is going to be in that AFC Championship game. And they're going to be able to play this thing out through the playoffs some. And that'll be really good stuff all the way through. I hope it's the Bengals that do it. That would be fantastic.
I think that the storylines are kind of going to write themselves, as you have arguably, and I think this almost unofficially crowns the division the best division in all of football.
And it is based on last year with the records, and the Bengals were missing Joe Burrow for the time they did, and they were still in the playoff hunt with 2 games to go. So it is the best.
You're also going to be filling an hour with 4 different teams with all their own storylines as they play different teams, not just each other. So I think that you're not going to have a ton of deep dives on any team. You'll have maybe one storyline for each team that I would imagine that Hard Knocks is going to focus on every week. And it's probably not going to get too much deeper than that. So if there is stuff going on that you don't want other teams to know, a la injuries going on that you don't want to be, the seriousness of injuries as you approach the playoffs, or whether there's in-house disputes or things of that nature that are maybe being reported on Twitter, but by Adam Schefter or whatever the case may be. But you don't want there to be a deep dive by Hard Knocks. I think that there's going to be plenty of room for teams to get rid of the storylines that they don't want out there and still have an interesting show because you have 4 teams.
Oh, yeah, it'll be very interesting. In fact, being in that business and knowing how this stuff works and with editing and everything, there's going to be some producers crying at stuff that's going to end up on the cutting room floor.
Right.
There's going to be stuff you can't put in there that you're like, God, this is such great stuff, but this is probably better and more relevant. And I wonder if they'll do, I don't know, probably not. I wish they would do a little online avenue with a couple other things, just kind of the unplugged stuff that they could throw out there and let us see. But it's going to be interesting. I can't really, I know Hard Knocks has done it in preseason, all that. I don't know. This is going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to it, and I don't think I'm going to be disappointed. And I plan on it being very compelling, and I don't see how they can miss.
I'm certain there will be thousands of NDAs signed for this production to take place during season. That said, I would be leery to bet against Vegas for any of these 4 teams in the end stretch of the season, because they are going to know things that the public will never know.
Yeah, that's true. It always seems to work that way, doesn't it?
Well, this is a little bit different circumstances because you're going to have way more eyes on that production staff than you have, generally speaking, in a locker room. So
you think some big whales are going to go throw some money at some, associate producers of HBO to ask questions about who was
like I said,
room,
I would be leery. I would be leery to be betting against Vegas in the last 6 weeks for any of the AFC North games.
I hear you.
Get your bets in early, I guess.
I wonder if I'm going to know anyone I'm going to have to do some research.
That's funny.
Oh, God.
Another thing I wanted to out of the division here, Baltimore announced this today, George. I'm pulling it up here. These are their alternate helmets. They're going to wear them once this season. What are your thoughts on these helmets?
That one right there?
Yes.
That's all right.
This feels very... No, not at all. This feels very Madden expansion team-esque or XFL.
It's got a little XFL feel to it, but it's not.
It doesn't feel NFL to me. I don't know. I guess because we're so used to, and that's the old school in me, which anybody who watches any of our Bearcat Journal shows knows that I'm probably old man yelling at clouds type guy in general anyway.
It'll
But
only get worse, trust me.
I'm certain of that. But yeah, they don't even feel collegiate to me. They just feel, I don't
They
know.
do have a bit of an arena football exit,
Yeah.
but that's okay. It's okay. Listen, this isn't nearly the change when the Bengals went to the stripes on the helmets way back in what, 80, 81, 81.
Yeah.
That shook the world, my man. That shook the world because the Bengals had you know, Paul Brown had those helmets. They looked like the Browns helmets, except they had the letters Bengals on it. If you remember the old,
I've seen them. Yeah.
And it's funny. My buddy was like, because the NFL kind of complained, they're too much like the Browns, and I think Paul Brown just said, screw it, we're gonna just do the most crazy thing ever and put this thing and put these stripes. When they unveiled those things, people went crazy. Now, people, it was very polarizing, and there were people who loved it. People are like, oh my God, that looks like trash. And this is, it did look like I don't even know they had arena in football teams back then, but it looked like that.
Probably not. No.
Yeah. People were just going nuts over those helmets. And then they had a big year, went to the Super Bowl with those things, and everybody's loved them since. I mean, and in defense of the Bengals, and it was genius to do that because that's one of the most recognizable helmets.
Anyway. Iconic, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, it really is. It's probably, I mean, you could put that next to a Browns helmet, and more people would know that's a Bengals helmet than the
100%.
Browns. And the Browns have been around forever.
I agree. Just wanted to share that bit of news as that came out today.
Yeah, that one I missed. I didn't know. I did not know that they had done that. But the Bengals alternate helmets in the white, and I wasn't totally wild about it until I saw it all together with the white uniform and everything. Those are pretty cool.
Yep. Outside of that, not a ton else going on with the Bengals there. So I guess maybe we'll wait for Chad to get back and either have Chad talk about the new signees for the 25 draft class for the football team, either him or maybe we'll see if Keegan will hop on with us, one or the other, as we talk about some of these new members of the 25 class, including 2 4-stars that the football team has been able to pick up.
And that's big. I mean, that's you hope you get to the finish line with them and get them signed, but they're mixing it up with some people and getting in on some pretty big names, and maybe we're already seeing the fruits of that new and improved and better funded recruiting department, because it looks like, to me, they've had a pretty good offseason. I thought they did pretty well in the portal.
I agree.
It seems like they're doing very well so far with this recruiting class. And so, yeah, I mean, when there's so much going on in college sports now with the portal and recruiting high school players, but I still feel that this coaching staff, and probably most coaching staffs, feels that their foundation is still going to be getting these high school kids in and retaining them and developing them, and that's going to be the backbone of the best program. Sure, there's going to be, I mean, some of these teams have so much NIL money that I don't know. You've just got to find ways to keep your guys in the fold and get them to where you want them to be. And that's going to be the backbone of most programs. And Cincinnati's going to have to build themselves that way. So it's good to see them getting in on these kids. And I really, really hope. And I think the early signing period helps you hang on to your class a little better now
Yeah.
than what it was when it was all February. It seems like, there will be a couple defections, but then there's also a couple flip the other way, and that's going to happen.
Right.
But so far, so good. I mean, they're not competing with chumps to get these kids. They're going at it with some pretty good programs.
And it sounds like it's going to start and end with culture. With this staff, they've made that pretty clear. As after what happened year one, it sounds like everything has been completely switched as far as the mindset there goes. And they've also been beating the drum hard for tape speaks louder than rankings. They're not so much concerned on if a guy's ranked at all, 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars. It doesn't really matter. What they want is guys that fit the culture and that look the part on tape, that have the measurables that they're looking for.
Yeah, and I've always felt that way. I've always felt that way even about the NFL draft. Like, it doesn't matter what Mel Kiper and those guys think. It matters what the guy can do and if he fits your system. And that seems to be what this program, what UC is doing, is they're looking for kids that can do what they are going to ask them to do, whether that's an offensive lineman, whether that's a defensive back, a running back, whatever, a quarterback. They're looking for the guys that can play in the system that they're, building around. And that's how you have to do it. So, yeah, I mean, I hope they continue to do it and continue to build. And who knows, maybe this new all-state Big 12 or whatever it's going to be, the money they get out of that will help. But then I guess every conference might end up doing that. What do you think of that with the alleged naming rights of the conference? That's kind of weird, but money's money.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit last night. I think that the Big 12 is in a position where the Big 10 and the SEC, they hold their name so sacred that they're not going to allow this kind of thinking, this type of mindset that the Big 12 is going to allow. Because I don't think the Big 12 is married to this name. They aren't 12 teams anymore.
Right.
Big whatever. Well, the Big 10 has the big. Okay, big whoop. They want to catch up financially to the Big 10 in the SEC, and that's going to take thinking outside of the box. And what better way to think outside the box than to sell naming rights to something that you're not married to, that you don't care about, like this name. So make it the All-State 12 or the All-State 16 or the big All-State conference, because who gives a shit?
Right. I know. I wish and we don't know for sure who it is or what they're doing yet.
Right.
But I mean, I kind of like Hooters or someone to get in on this, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Somebody, I think it was Brent last night, said, because I think Bucky's name was being mentioned with this.
That would be hilarious.
They said make it the Bucky's conference, but have 16 E's after Bucky's.
That would be good. Oh my God. And then you'd have that freaking Bucky thing as the logo for the conference. Yeah, I don't know. I don't, but I give them credit for exploring this and seeing what kind of money would be out there for it. And I'll tell you what, as much as, the money part of it is big, but the sponsor is going to want to make sure that conference is in good shape and is not in shambles. And, they kind of have a vested interest in it then. So it'll be interesting to see what shakes out of that. But,
keep in mind, Brett Yormark comes. Keep in mind that Brett Yormark comes from NASCAR, and NASCAR has sold places to put logos that they sold their souls to the logo, essentially. And I think that you'll probably see Yormark continue to move in that type of direction, where you'll see patches on helmets or on jerseys, and you'll see logos on fields and things that you haven't seen before, because they're going to, I mean, you've seen it in baseball, you've seen it in the NBA, you've seen it even the NFL reluctantly, maybe more so than the other big leagues. But soccer, you don't even have logos anymore. You just have the You don't have
Yeah.
team logos. You just have the
RP.
giant logo, right?
Yeah.
Toyota or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And I hope they never go that route or that extreme, especially in college sports. Because
Right.
I hate that.
Well, I
But
think there's too much, and during the game, and you see it with, I mean, first of all, how ingenious was Allstate to get that on the netting for the field goal kicks and all that
yeah,
stuff? That
yeah,
and I was thinking, it's funny. I don't even think this story had come out yet about the Big 12, and I'm watching the Reds game the other night, and I'm seeing, the video boards behind home plate that you see on it and the advertising. And I saw some, I'm like, what's that? And I'm looking it up. I'm like, holy crap. Like it works. It works to have that advertising, in places that you see when you're watching the game on television. So it doesn't necessarily have to be on the helmet or anything. I mean, it's just, you may have to put a logo on the field, but they already do that. And you're going to have it, in the end zones and everywhere else. That's fine. A lot of it makes the world go round, and it keeps, the other thing about live sporting events too. I mean, that's the biggest draw on television now. I mean, you
right.
can have whatever the hell you want. It is not going to touch. I mean, now you got NHL and NBA, on network over-the-air television finals.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't there for a long time. You'd have to go find it on some cable channel, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, crap, this live sports stuff that nobody knows what's going to happen, that's where the action is now. And so they're going to have plenty of opportunities besides naming the conference act. They'll have plenty of places to put those logos. So, yeah, hopefully it doesn't, the guys aren't out there running around with looking like a car in a NASCAR race.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't go that way either. But again, I think that's what sets the Big 12 apart from the Big 10 and the SEC is that they're not as married to the name as those two super.
You know what? No, look, I you like the name Big whatever, which is cool. But these conferences with the Big 12, well, they don't have 12. Big 10, they don't have 10.
They got 20.
Right. I mean, what sense does that make? You may as well name it the All-State Conference.
That's
my Big 10's damn there in every state now.
Pretty much. FC Cincinnati, they lost the game. I was back on the betting train. I won a game.
Heck yeah. How about that?
4-2 over San Jose on the late night game. 10:30 kickoff.
Kubo comes in the game and gets a hat trick.
He did.
Player of the week. Or they call it player of the match day, but player of the week. And San Jose is not very good, but still going on the road to get a win like that and get back on track. Now they got Philly tomorrow night, and Philly hasn't been playing all that great. But if anybody knows about Philadelphia, it's Pat Noonan and Chris Albright. And, Noonan talked, yesterday, about he knows those coaches. He coached with them. And when their back's against the wall and it's getting there for Philly, he figures they'll know that they'll turn it on. And so he's not taking anything for granted. Miazga got hurt Saturday night. The other kid's gone with the U.S. national team, Robinson. So that's two defenders there in front, high quality defenders that they're missing. So, their depth will be tested, but man, they're playing well. Man, you see what, they're 2 points behind first place Miami, but Miami's played 2 more games than Cincinnati. So essentially, when you go points per match, Cincinnati's leading the conference. Man, they're doing a lot of good things. And, they had their stretches earlier, but boy, you never know what will happen down the road, but by God, they've got this thing right.
Yeah, Philly in their last 5, they lost their last match. They had a draw the previous 3 before that, and it's been that long since they won a game, which was their 5th game of those last 5. 5 games ago was their last win. So Philly is probably desperate for a win at this point.
And that's a good franchise, man. They're always. I mean, Cincinnati beat them last year in like the conference semifinals, if I remember right. It was a tough match. It was like 1-0 or something. That's a good franchise. And look, the hierarchy of FC Cincinnati came through that franchise, so that's good enough for me because those dudes have turned it around here.
Well, we'll see what happens. That game kicks off at 7:45 tomorrow night. Outside of that, anything going on in high school sports around the area, George?
Everything's over, man. Mason won that state championship in baseball, and I think everything is over. I can't think of anything. Maybe I'll dip into the AAU ranks, and I'll have a 13 and under AAU basketball report for you.
Let me ask you this. We talked a little bit about this on I think on the Bearcat Bounce podcast maybe last week. But Jake Thielen gets the Covcath spot.
Yes.
Any thoughts on Jake Thielen leaving
Good
Cincinnati?
For him. I mean, that's a good gig. I mean, if you're going to coach, I mean, there's plenty of good schools in Northern Kentucky, but that's the plum job for basketball because Covcath has been getting it done year after year. Coach Rusatz did a great job, won state championships, and Jake getting a chance at his age to be a head coach at a program like that, man, that's a big deal. I mean, he's got to be over the moon about that because, it's really good for him to get that head coaching experience now after what he's done, and he knows what he's doing.
He also graduated from there, scored a shit ton of points for them. So
yeah, it's a perfect fit, and he knows that community well. I think it's a perfect fit. You didn't want to see him leave UC, but at the same time, I get it. It doesn't sound like a step up, but for his career, it is to show he can run a program. And God knows, he could be there for 30 years or he could be there for 5. And, we'll be seeing his name somewhere else at a college job someday.
Well, and as I mentioned on the BBP when we talked about it, it also doesn't hurt this staff to have a friend right over the river at a high-profile job like that.
True. That's true because they put some players through.
So we'll see how that develops for young Jake Thielen, but happy trails to him.
Yeah, I'm happy for him. I'm happy for Covcath. That's good. It's a good fit.
All right. Well, outside of that, you got anything else this week, George?
No. Golfed like crap today, but still won money thanks to my teammates. Thank you very much. That's about it.
All right. Well, we will see you next week back here, same time, same place. Thank you again to Remington Tavern. You can find them at 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. You can check them out on Instagram at RemyTavCincy, or you can follow them on Facebook. But until Tuesday, 9 p.m. next week, for George Vogel, I'm Aaron Smith, and we'll see you then.
Thank you.